Hello, this is Kinninigan from RagingReptilian.com. This is in response to a question I was asked by one of my subscribers. If anyone ever wants to ask me a question about a topic, my email is kinninigan@gmail.com. I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. That question was, Kinninigan, what is the exact Roman term of bread and circuses? And this is a really interesting and very important topic that comes right out of Rome, because bread and circus is not just a ancient Roman concept. It is in fact, they've taken the idea of Roman bread and circus, and in modern times it's been amplified 1,000-fold. And I'll explain to you what that meant. In ancient Rome, as the Roman Empire grew through countless wars of expansion and shedding a lot of blood and expanding the Roman Empire, there was also a lot of corruption in politics with the Senate and Caesars of Rome themselves. So the Romans decided that the best way to keep the people from not revolting, and you're looking at a pic I just pulled up there. This comes from a Roman poet named Juvenal, who said, "Give them bread and circuses and they will never revolt." So, in a nutshell, Rome was the first socialist welfare state. As Rome decided, and they started out with building amphitheaters and holding plays. The amphitheaters would get bigger as the Roman Empire grew. Then they would start making coliseums, which look a lot like modern sports stadiums. I got a lot to cover on this in modern times. And decided that they will do something that will keep the poor from revolting in Rome, which is a very simple concept. Give them gladiatorial games, give them plays, give them piazzas where they can hold musical plays for the children, and eventually they would amplify this. And this is Circus Maximus. There's a reason it's called Circus Maximus. It's a hippodrome. The chariot races that would eventually... This would be one of the largest bread and circus events ever built in the Roman Empire. And strangely enough, doesn't it look like a modern horse racing track nowadays, or a NASCAR track? Yeah, where do you think those concepts came from? Except they were doing chariot races back then. The Roman bread and circuses got very violent, though. If anyone's ever seen the movie Gladiator, infamously when he says, "Are you not entertained?" there was a reason for that. So Rome decided that they were going to give all their poor citizens free wheat so they can make bread. One thing is, you keep them fed and you keep them entertained, and they'll keep a blind eye onto what's going on in politics. However, there's a very unique new spin to bread and circuses going on right now in the political spectrum, especially in America with President Trump, because the bread and circuses isn't working anymore. And people are starting to see the corruption in politics. And it's coming from the people, not the Trump side. It's coming from the psychopathic left Democratic side. What are all the Democrats promising for people? A free welfare state, socialism. Socialism is a form of bread and circuses. It's pretty interesting. So Rome, first of all, in ancient Rome, they gave all their people free water. Very important, right? We pay for water in modern times, except all Romans got free water. Pretty interesting, right? They didn't pay for water. If you were poor in Rome, you also got free wheat to make bread. And eventually, you would be allowed to go to the games. Now, the correct Latin name for bread and circuses is Panem et Circenses. I want to give you a little Masonic background on circus also. Anyone remember Barnum and Bailey, the 3-ring circus? 3 rings, 33. Yeah, you don't think? And eventually the reason why old school circuses have died out in the United States is because a lot of the revelations of animal abuse, especially with elephants and lions and circus performers themselves. I'll give you a kind of a guideline in modern history after World War II, how we evolved bread and circuses in modern times. But this was a very real Roman concept. And not only does it involve bread and circuses, it involves, of all things in ancient Rome, it involved alcohol, Now, I just pulled up a pic here. Here's a bunch of guys eating food, drinking beer, and watching a sports game at a local sports bar. This was the concept that Rome had in mind for their people. Keep them fed, keep them drunk, keep them entertained, and they'll have a blind eye as to what's going on in politics. Now, it's a little side note here. I worked in a bar years back in between my careers, many careers I've had. And I was taught by a very good old school bartender, Kenny, if you want to be successful in this industry, never talk about politics or religion in front of people at the bar because you never know who you're going to offend. And secondly, people come to the bar to forget about religion and politics. Unless you're a liberal, I guess you're just going to go out and run your mouth anywhere you go, whether you're in a bar or not, right? So I find it ironic that the people that are mainly pushing for bread and circus, look at the media distractions from the left, because there's a very interesting concept going on here. Take YouTube, for example, and the censorship we experience on YouTube, including my channel, which has been demonetized, my other channel taken down, because YouTube was supposed to be made originally as a platform for bread and circuses. Mainly, you know, keep them entertained, have them watching YouTube videos all day. Except when people telling people the truth started to come on the platform, such as myself and other researchers throughout the years, and we started exposing the corruption going on in government, they didn't like that on their platform. And I'll give you a little history of how bread and circus evolved after World War II, because it's kind of changed from decade to decade. And now in modern times, the you know, what are Democrats promising to all illegal aliens? Bread and circus, free welfare, free food, free health benefits, and all they want is their vote. They don't want them digging into the corruption going on the Democratic Party now, do they? No, they don't. This is why a lot of modern news media outlets have been infiltrated by deep state operatives, including the one I made the video about yesterday. But oh, here's a good picture here: football, hamburger, and a beer. Yeah. So I'm also going to defend myself. If you're a sports fan, I'm not accusing you of being a victim of Roman bread and circus. You might be a hardworking person that goes to work from 9 to 5 every week, but there was a reason for this. So, you know, but I will tell you this. Don't think it's by coincidence that mainly, I know the days have changed now. Why do you think the NFL games, the biggest sporting events in American culture, is football, right? And the Super Bowl, obviously. Why do you think that was put on the original day of the Sabbath on Sunday? That was supposed to be a day dedicated to holy worship for Christians of all things, right? No, they wanted you to be drunk watching a football game. Do you understand how this works now? And sadly in modern times also, although it's not really a modern thing because drug use has been going on for quite a long time, but drugs is a big part of bread and circuses nowadays too. Basically replace keep them fed and entertained with keep them high and entertained, and you get the same thing. Now after World War II, there's not going to be any links for this video because there's nothing I'm really reading from. I'm giving you my philosophical analysis of this, having studied history, and especially the Roman Empire and ones after that. And I watch a lot of shows on ancient history. I know what Romans did when they conquered new lands. The first thing they would do is build amphitheaters, build you know, coliseums that hold fights in for the locals and show them Roman entertainment. And this was supposed to keep their minds off the corruption going on in politics. Now we have numerous, there are numerous, yeah, this is kind of funny. Anyone remember the original Star Trek series? There was a Star Trek episode called Bread and Circuses when they landed on a planet that was like a, it was like the Roman Empire for that time. Pretty interesting how they mock this stuff right in your face all the time. So the idea, yeah, there's a lot of different quotes. This is one from the famous Roman philosopher Cicero. The evil was not in bread and circuses per se, but in the willingness of the people to sell their rights as free men for full bellies in the excitement of games which would serve to distract them from other human hungers, which bread and circuses can never appease. Now, let's go up after World War II and see how, of all things, bread in circuses was amplified in all places here in America. Right after World War II, during the quote-unquote baby boomer generation, typically in the 50s is when we had something known as the television and TV shows blow up in the United States, where a lot more people. It started out with radio shows, okay? That was a form of entertainment, yes. But I'm talking post-World War II here, so I can kind of show you how decade to decade there's been social engineering of bread and circuses going on right in front of your face. We had the baby boomer generation, right? A lot of men came back from World War II. What did they do? They hooked back up with their wives or girlfriends, got married, bought houses, and made babies. We had a population boom in the United States. And, the 1950s is nothing what it is today. So they gave us television. The idea was the man goes to work from 9 to 5 every day, comes home, puts on the evening news, and gets entertained by TV shows all night. I Love Lucy and all that good stuff, right? I Love Lucy is actually a pun on I Love Lucifer, but let's not talk about that. You get the idea. We got sitcoms. We got movies. Movies is a huge form of bread and circus. And eventually we would get the welfare system set up in America for poor people. Keep them fed and keep them entertained. Now, not everyone is going to sporting events every Sunday in America to watch football games or baseball games or hockey games. So television would become one of the biggest forms of circus, per se. Now, in earlier times before World War II, the circus was really big. So were like freak shows that they would go around and. But a lot of sinister things came out of circuses, and kind of the circus died. So then they started giving us TV shows. Now, we had a population boom in the United States, and we also had a lot of people looking into corruption of politics at that time. So what happened conveniently in the 1960s? Well, the CIA replaces bread with their own invention known as LSD, and we get the psychedelic movement of the 60s, which was backed by the CIA. And that was a form to keep the youth in America, leading up to the Summer of Love, 1969, in Woodstock, keep them high and entertained. And they'll keep a blind eye. You remember all the anti-war rhetoric going on with Vietnam in the late 60s? Yeah, there was a reason why we had the psychedelic movement back then. And that was to keep a lot of the youth off the corruption going on. And the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which brought us into the war, which we know was a false flag attack. Starting to get the idea now. Eventually, we would have the psychedelic movement in the 60s. Then in the 70s, we had a new form, disco pops up. But in the 70s, we still had a huge movement with, I'd say, rock and roll music at that time, and people going to concerts, and a lot of people sadly going off to the Vietnam War and being killed. That's one of the ways they took care of the population boom after World War II. It was not only just the Vietnam War, it was also the Korean War also. The 80s, we get new interesting thing. We start to get a population boom in the 80s after, the 70s are done. But a new drug starts to, now, this drug has been around for a long time. However, we get the sudden rise of a new form of this drug known as crack cocaine in the 80s. And what does that do? It devastates the ghettos in urban cities, just like where I am in Philadelphia. It started out in Los Angeles. And who taught these people, like in times back then, how to turn cocaine into crack cocaine by mixing water, cocaine, and baking soda together? Right, who taught them that? Then we would have a huge influx of cocaine addiction in the 80s. And not only that, but we get a lot more entertainment ramped up. A lot of movies in the 80s, a lot of concerts. And then in the 90s, things would really change. It's really interesting because in the 90s, we get a huge heroin epidemic. And, then in the 90s, we get something known as, that really blows up, known as the Internet. Anyone remember America Online? Yeah, the Internet Now, going up to modern times, social media is a form of bread and circus. They want you logged on to Facebook all day, and we know that all these social media platforms are heavily regulated and censored. They're only censored for things that are telling you the truth of really the corruption going on around the world, which bread and circus is supposed to steer you away from. That's why on Facebook, on YouTube, on other social media platforms, they don't want you exposing the Illuminati, the New World Order, corruption going on in politics, pedophilia, human trafficking, drug running by the CIA. They don't want that talked about, right? False flag attacks. Now, in modern times, and even in the, it's going to get really interesting coming up towards the 2020 election. It seems like the circus isn't working anymore, and people are waking up to corruption going on in our government. This is why we have the Democrats offering socialism. That's a concept that comes out of all places of Rome. It basically meant that Rome was in charge of all the goods and slaves that came in there, and they would disperse out wheat to the poor and give them, games and other things to keep them distracted and keep them away from the corruption going on in their own thing. And this is really important because the main thing that Rome wanted people to do was continue, for at least the wealthy, is to continue to pay taxes or tribute to Rome, which they had to do. And people wouldn't pay taxes if they thought they were paying taxes to a corrupt regime or government now, would they? So this is why bread and circus was not only marketed for the poor of Rome, it was also marketed for the wealthy, which is why when you went to Roman games, like in Gladiator, they were filled with the wealthy people of Rome and the poor, everyone from the emperor to the poorest people, who would usually have the seats at the top of the stadium. You ever go to a modern sports game and the cheap tickets are up at the top and the more expensive ones are right down near the 50-yard line? Same concept in a Roman Colosseum, with obviously the 50-yard line right here being where the emperor's box would be. And everyone would go to these games. And if you've seen the movie Gladiator, very insightful. And that little line that he says in there, "Are you not entertained?" Oh, here it goes right here. And that is the real name of bread and circus, Panem et Circenses. And this was the concept. As Rome would expand their empire throughout the world, and this is in no coincidence because Greece and Rome had a very close relation. Who gave us the Olympics? Yeah, that's something that comes right out of Greece of all things, isn't it? And this would be the eventual worldwide Roman spread of bread and circuses would be such things as the Olympics spreading throughout the world. And so sporting events is not a new concept. It's just the gladiatorial games going on in Roman Colosseums being replaced with modern day athletes. The idea is to keep people fed, drunk, entertained, keep them high on drugs, and they will keep a blind eye to what is going on in the corruption of politics and what's going on. Now, I like this picture right here. Yeah, Hail Caesar Obama. The biggest, what did he do for a lot of Democrats? We got Obamacare, we got Obama phones, we got welfare, we got Social Security. And what were him and Eric Holder caught doing? Running weapons down to drug cartels in Mexico so they could smuggle their drugs into the country also. Yeah, he was involved in drug dealing. There's a reason for that. Like I said, they want to keep... you think this is by coincidence why all urban cities are having massive... or all across the country, for example, that right after we invade Afghanistan, today is 9/11, remember that. Right after we invade Afghanistan from Daddy George Bush, we got a huge influx of opioid and heroin addiction in the United States. And where are the poppy fields in the world? Afghanistan. Why do you think we've been there for so long? In Roman times, wars did not carry on for 15 years. They were over in a day. The only reason we've been there is milking all the heroin out of there to create a huge worldwide heroin epidemic. Then, as you see here, we get such things as MTV, American Idol, all these reality TV shows that pop up in modern times, and now with the it's social media on top of that. That's what they want people doing all day. This is your smartphone is a form of bread and circus. So this is basically in a concept of what bread and circuses is, or Panem et Circenses, is keep them entertained and keep them fed, and people will keep a blind eye to politics and never revolt, which is more or less a form of modern day socialism. So that is what bread and circus actually is, except the light at the end of the rainbow in this is people are waking up to the corruption of the deep state, and their bread and circuses is not working anymore. Why do you think when you turn on modern news stations, modern, a lot of the, I'm talking about CNN, MSNBC, why do you think what they do all day is just attack Donald Trump? That's to reflect the corruption away from the Democrats. Originally, TV was invented as a way to keep people distracted, but when it didn't work anymore, when you got people like truthers infiltrating YouTube, publishing videos exposing corruption, why do you think we're censored off the platform? This was strictly supposed to be about keeping people fed and entertained and keeping their eyes off the corruption. However, when we start exposing the corruption, started talking about the New World Order, Agenda 21, the Illuminati, secret societies, then they got triggered, and this is why all the censorship is happening right now. Anyway, that is all on the video for Roman bread and circus. I will be making quite a few more videos on Rome, but this is just a concept that comes out of Rome that is obviously still going on today, and it takes forms and everything from, like I said, heroin, Facebook. Modern gladiatorial games could be equivalated to the MMA, worldwide wrestling. You get the idea. Baseball, football, hockey, basketball. There's same soup, different bowl. They just reinvented a new sport, but they still more or less happen in Roman-style coliseums. Even NASCAR models its own racetrack after the Hippodrome, as I just showed you. Yeah. Keep people drunk, fed, and entertained, and they will never revolt. Or at least they hope so, right? And this was one of the ways that I think that the Illuminati has perfected in controlling the entire planet, is because you couldn't hold this kind of power over billions of people without keeping them fed or entertained. And people, like, for example, in third world countries that don't get bread and circus, like look at Mogadishu, right? That's where you have very violent, rebellious cities with armed gangs running around and warlords and all that stuff. It's not by coincidence. That's what they try to avoid in Rome. So they kept their people fed and entertained, and hopefully the people would never revolt. Anyway, it's going to be all for this video. Any questions or comments, leave them below. And until we speak again, this is Kinninigan, and take care.